Mueller breaking his silence today to resign and hand off any further work to Congress.
The opinion says that the Constitution requires a process other than the criminal justice system to formally accuse a sitting president of wrongdoing.
Mueller flatly suggesting this is now only Congress's job, not the prosecutors or the press or the voters, but Congress to decide if and whether high crimes were committed by Donald Trump. Speaker Pelosi not breaking any new ground today in response, while the chairman who would oversee any impeachment probe, Jerry Nadler, stepped out here to respond.
With respect to impeachment question, at this point, all options are on the table, and nothing should be ruled out. What Special Counsel Mueller said loud and clear today for the American people is that President Trump is lying when he says no collusion, no obstruction, and that he was exonerated, and that the Constitution points to Congress to take action to hold the president accountable. That's exactly what we will do.
What is accountability? Mueller says that's for Congress to decide and not to outsource those judgments back to him or ask him to go any further than he did in his written report. And Mueller used this new rare speech today to basically warn the House Democrats they won't get an ounce more from him if they subpoena testimony.
Now, I hope and expect this to be the only time that I will speak to you in this manner. There has been discussion about an appearance before Congress. Any testimony from this office would not go beyond our report. The work speaks for itself. And the report is my testimony.
The work speaks for itself. That's vintage Mueller right there, and he's echoing a classic legal concept that some things speak for themselves. Lawyers often quote this point in Latin, res ipsa loquitur, to stress how some evidence is so clear you don't need to talk over it. Shakespeare even famously invoked the same idea to stress the limits of rhetoric, one character proclaiming, "What shall I say more than I have inferred?" Now, this idea may be a rarity in our politics and society. Mueller arguing today his work does not require more words or inferences. The work exists. It speaks. And Mueller's saying the only question left is what to do about it.
Any testimony from this office would not go beyond our report. The work speaks for itself. And the report is my testimony.
Former federal prosecutor Seth Waxman is here along with Eugene Robinson. Seth, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think Mr. Mueller has said that he's made his findings. He's laid down the gauntlet essentially in front of Congress and is looking to Congress to do its thing. Now, Congress will bring in witnesses and hopefully look at these documents. This isn't being done in a vacuum right now. We have Mr. Trump thumbing his nose at Congress saying, you're not going to get these documents. You're not going to get these witnesses. So what's Congress to do? Are they going to abdicate their responsibility and essentially confirm what Trump's always believed, that he could walk out onto Fifth Avenue, shoot someone, and there'd be no consequence? You know, if this impeachment were to take place and he were to be charged, because at the end of the day, that's what impeachment is. It's a charging document. Then you look to the Senate as to whether there's a possibility of him getting removed.
But let me focus you on the core Mueller claim here, which, as you know, is legal. I'm sure you've heard that expression before, right?
I have.
And there is a rebuttal to that. Here, I'm going to not present, just Trump folks who attack Mueller either which way, but a credible rebuttal by Michael Tomasky, a very talented writer who's on the left. And he says Mueller wants the evidence to speak for itself. The evidence, however, was not allowed to speak for itself, as he knows. The Attorney General spoke for it. Is Bob Mueller still playing by old rules on an imaginary neutral playing field when it's actually distorted and uphill from Bill Barr and left to their own devices? That leaves him sliding underground.
Well, I think Mr. Mueller thought today was evening that playing field, where he came out, made some very specific, directed, targeted comments to essentially say, look, the evidence is there, just read it and do your job. So I think he may have leveled that playing field. I would frankly like to see Mr. Mueller testify.
You think he leveled it?
To a degree.
Let me bring in Gene, because you're the careful prosecutor. Gene is the careful chronicler of Washington. Gene, there are other prosecutors who also operate under these rules, similar rules, who've come out and spoken more directly. Or listed off. He didn't even mention today, and again, it's his call. I'm not second guessing, but I'm asking you if what we're to believe is that this is the last time he ever wants to speak. then Gene, why didn't he say, by the way, we busted up a crime spree by Trump aides? The president's campaign chair and lawyer and national security advisor are all convicted felons now. Roger Stone was hiding, allegedly, contacts related to stolen emails that were involved in tipping the election, and that's the obstruction, and we don't know what else we didn't get. He didn't do any of that. Why, Gene?
Well, again, I would love to have been Robert Mueller's editor. I would have had plenty of suggestions for how he might have done this. Nonetheless, I do agree that this was his way, I believe, of leveling the playing field. He realized that his work had been distorted, had been misrepresented, and that people hadn't read the report. And by selecting the points to highlight that he highlighted, I think he did go a considerable way toward getting the discussion back where he wanted it, where he thinks it should be. That said, could he have done it in a punchier way? Absolutely. There's no question about that.
Well, and substantively, there were things he just didn't get into. Now, Seth, Mark Warner, the senator, is pushing past what Mueller said and saying, look, it's not his call. He may have to testify. Take a look.
When he becomes a private citizen, there will be those in Congress, probably led by the House, that will urge him to testify, and I think he'll have a responsibility to do so.
Your view, Seth?
I entirely agree with that. Bob Mueller, by reputation, by experience, is a renowned and well-respected individual, but no one's above responding to a subpoena. And there are countless questions that are left unanswered. Why didn't Don Jr. testify? Why didn't the president testify? Those parts of the report are redacted. Was it because they pled the Fifth? Or were told they were going to plead the Fifth? I mean, impeachment is a political process. It does not have to arise to criminal conduct to constitute impeachment grounds. So if the American people and Congress were to hear, for example, that the President of the United States was invoking the Fifth, that could be something that could be considered. Many other questions. So, having Mr. Mueller speak today was obviously very telling, and it raises a lot of questions and gives the American people a feel for what happened. But to testify under oath in front of Congress would be that much more illuminating, and I think it's owed to the American people and to Congress.
Gene Robinson, Seth Waxman, thank you both. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.